The Evergreen Show, taking your business from seed to sapling to towering giant. With your hosts, best-selling author and business growth experts Noah Fleming and Sean Veltman. This is the only show that gives you proven, pragmatic, and immediately applicable business growth strategies every week in 15 minutes or less. Here's Noah and Sean.
Well, hello everybody. We are back for another episode of The Evergreen Show. This is Noah Fleming with my co-host, the doctor himself, Mr. Sean Veltman out of Calgary. Sean, give me the scoop. What's going on? Are you still there in Calgary?
I am in Calgary. It's sunny as always and freezing as usual here. We're at minus 39 with the wind chill. And I am hiding up inside by the fire.
Oh, you need to go somewhere warm. So listen, here's what's on the docket for today, which I want to talk about because I think this is fabulous. So my father-in-law pinned me down the other day on the weekend. He said, I was reading the New Yorker this week, and I saw this article that I was reading it, and the whole time I was thinking about you and everything you talk about each week, and I had to show you this. And so he gave me this article, and it's fascinating. It's about a company I've never heard of called Happy or Not. And Happy or Not makes essentially a push button, almost like the old Staples button, which you press if you're happy or you're not with the customer service or customer satisfaction at a specific business or what have you. The interesting thing about the article was that these little devices have been deployed over thousands and thousands and thousands. I think they said over 1 million they've put into different businesses. And they told one story about a garage, a gas station, a garage, where they would be able to identify times when service was really poor. They would be able to identify times when sales were dropping for whatever reasons, and they just would go back and look at these buttons and be able to see what the distinction was. Now, Sean, you know that we've talked about something very similar a lot, so I'm going to pass this over to you now and tell the audience for us, say what it is we're talking about, that we talk about often, how that correlates to this article.
This is internal benchmarking at its finest. And one of the things that I really loved about the article and about the approach that Happy or Not takes is they start with the simplest possible case and get going as quickly as possible. And it's one of those things that we talk about a lot, and we've helped a lot of our clients do this, just to get going immediately. Because really a lot of companies don't do that. They wait for a complex solution, a perfect solution. They start guessing at the start and say, well, what if we get a lot of good responses, but our sales are down? Or what if this? Or we need to take that into account. And they start overcomplicating things before they start doing anything. And what this company does, and what the article spells out beautifully, is the power of starting absolutely simply and getting your information from that and starting to make better decisions based on the simplest, easiest to gather information that you have.
Yeah, so, one of the things I said there early on was it was a single button. Let me correct that. So they would give you 4 buttons. One would be dark green and a smiley face, an emoji. One would be light green with a little bit of a less happy face. One would be light red, and one would be sort of very red and very frowning. And what they ask customers to do is just simply hit the button. Were you happy with your experience or not? And if so, how happy? And it was really interesting to me that they took this, again, this very simple act of collecting customer data, which you and I talk about a lot, and they put it into this very sort of visual format that people can easily use. And, and the article makes all sort of distinctions against things like surveys and everything else, which we've also railed about very often. But this, you're right, Sean, this is one of the things that we help our clients do a lot, is help them internal benchmark. And we do it a little bit differently. We look at things like sales data, revenue points, all sorts of different data points, which we help them collect to define where these moments are. So this is just, again, another unique way of doing this. I love the example that they shared about where they took the managers from the best stores and they replaced them with the managers in the worst stores. And what they saw happen was those results instantly shifted. And so what we do when we work with clients on things like internal benchmarking, let's suppose we're in a retail situation. Again, we might look at the times when sales are down. In a service industry, we might look at when are the hours or the times when the tips seem to be and the gratuities seem to be decreased. What are the distinctions for that? In a larger company, we might look at the sales reps, which seem to generate the best results, and often we find this correlation between activity there, and so we can then use that benchmark as a way to bring everybody up. So you know me, I love this topic. I think it's incredibly important. I think it's something that not nearly anybody is doing enough of, and I love the approach that Happy or Not's taken. I don't necessarily think everybody needs to go out there and get Happy or Not buttons, but they can start thinking about what are those data points or those interesting moments in time that you can benchmark and try to improve. Now I'll shut up, Sean.
Well, I was just going to agree with you wholeheartedly there. I think that, what's really important about the Happy or Not story, and what's really important about when we talk about using internal benchmarking, is just taking away this one point that it's easy to get started. Find the simplest case that you can and start measuring it. Because what's going to happen is you're going to get new questions that pop up there. You're going to get new insights. You're going to find that there is a store that's 10 times worse than your best performing store. And you can very inexpensively run an experiment there to see if you can improve the performance of the bad store. I found working with call centers that there were some reps who had 3 times as much gross profit generated per hour on the phone as the worst performing reps. And so, the goal isn't to make everybody into the best performing rep, but if you can find the distinctions and help bring the lowest performers closer to the average, then that represents incredible profit potential in any domain.
So let me put you on the spot here for a minute, Sean, and let's try and come up with a few examples of situations where, let's suppose our listeners don't have Happy or Not devices, but they want to embrace internal benchmarking. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Let's suppose we're a B2B industrial manufacturer. We have a sales team of 10 guys who are out there pounding the pavement every day. This is an area where we want to improve. We want to improve our sales results. Our machine shop does fine. Our purchasing department does great. We fulfill orders on times, but we have the bandwidth to do more. What would be a great way for us to internal benchmark some data points?
So the first thing to do is to identify your top and bottom performers. And that should be easy with the sales team because the measurement numbers are easy. It's their commission or their gross sales or the gross profit that they're generating. The next thing that you want to do is start to look at the composition of their activities over the course of weeks, months, quarters, and years. So it might be the case that your highest performing rep also has the highest percentage of in-person appointments. It might be the case that they have the lowest percent of in-person appointments, but they do a lot more on the phone and their volume is greater. It's going to be different company to company, but what you want to see is in your company with your highest performers, what are they doing differently? And when you can find that, then it becomes really easy to run an experiment by taking the lowest performers and getting them to act more like the high performers, right? And I can hear the sales managers protesting at this already, and they say it's a lot more complicated than that. You can't just take a single measurement and apply it. There's interpersonal factors, there's relationships, there's so many variables you're not thinking about here, Sean. And I say, I agree. But when you run this experiment, you're going to find that by doing the same types of activities in the same ratios as the high performers, your low performers will improve. They will start to get better. They will sell more. And all of those other things can be trained. But what you can measure and what you can actually take impact on right now is what kinds of activities are they doing?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. So again, let's think about Sean's example there. Think about the small things that might have a huge impact on the experience, on your results, whatever it is. I mentioned earlier the example of, Sean's come to the challenge here and he's given us me putting him on the spot and saying, Sean, give us something about the industrial world. Think about the more simple ways too, though. Think about, again, in the small business, for example, I mentioned this early at the start of the podcast today, we've used internal benchmarking in restaurants, for example, or restaurant groups where there's a number of restaurants. And we found where some restaurants, the servers average tips of, let's say 22 to 25%. Whereas other restaurants, the average is only 14, 15%. Why? What's the difference? Is it just because they're in different geographic regions? Is it because they're just in a different area? Or is there something different being done by those servers in those other establishments? Are there superstars that we can learn from, that we can take that and bring everybody up? And what we did in one example was exactly that. We brought in the superstars to train the others, and we were instantly able to bring them up from somewhere from like 14% to 20%. So again, just a really simple way of using this concept of internal benchmarking. And again, Sean, I know we could talk about this all day. Is there anything else you want to add to this discussion right now?
There's a few things, and this might be a bit of a tangent, but first thing I want to point out is what you said there about bringing in the superstars. That's such a powerful exercise, right? Especially if you're a larger company. You know, it costs nothing to fly in a superstar from one region to another for a few days or a week. And what that allows you to do is multiple things. One, you get the training that Noah talked about. But two, it allows you to very quickly see whether or not it's the person or the environment. So if you've got a server who's getting 25% tips in the Northeast, and somebody in the Southwest says, well, that's just a regional thing. We don't get more than 17% here. Great. Fly in your superstar. See what tips they get in that low-performing region. And if they get their same 20 to 25%, you've immediately destroyed any argument that it's a regional effect. You've immediately destroyed any argument that says, well, that sounds like a good idea in theory, but what you don't understand about our area is blah, 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 blah. So it's such a great exercise to actually run these experiments to see, can we transfer the capability. The other thing I just want to point out, and this is a full-on tangent, is looking at tips in restaurants is the best indicator of customer satisfaction or happiness or loyalty that you can get, right? Especially if you're looking within one restaurant. People will fill out surveys and forms all day long, but people actually vote with money. And if you're leaving a high tip, that is a proxy for saying, I had a great experience here. If you're leaving a low tip, you're saying, I had a bad experience. It is the easiest, quickest, and most effective way to measure the customer satisfaction in that environment.
So the one interesting thing you said there, which I think is key, because again, we're getting on this restaurant thing, but let's get off it for a second. People vote with their time, their attention, and their wallets. And so you can find outliers in your sales department. You can find outliers in your service business. You can find outliers based on how many people come into a retail shop and don't buy. Who was working at that time and why? Is there a distinction there between the attitudes of that person, the way that they present themselves? And, you know, in the Happy or Not article, they give very specific examples of situations just like that. So I think, again, the key point here is, look, the tools, again, are not necessarily the most important thing here. It doesn't matter if you have the buttons. What matters to me is that you're actually doing these things. So pick something small and start to measure it. You don't need necessarily fancy surveys. You don't need anything like that. You just need to pick one area of your business and start to monitor that. Start to look at how many people walk in and buy or don't buy. Start to look at the tips coming in at certain times. Start to look at the different commonalities or distinctions between your sales reps. How well does Jim do versus Steve, and why? What's the thing that we can benchmark here that we can learn from? So again, you know, when Sean and I talk about sales process and all these things, one of the key things that we almost always start with sales teams that we work with is tracking activity, because we can almost always make this correlation between activity and results. And it's not always the case, but we can usually find these things. But the key point I think I'm trying to make, Sean, is we need to start tracking that data in the first place, even on a very simple scale such as that.
You know, and that's exactly it, Noah. It's never been a better time to have this kind of mindset than right now, because the tools are available. It's easy to get them. If you don't know how to get them, if you don't know how to do this kind of analysis, give Noah and myself a call. We'll help you with it, and you will be amazed at how inexpensive it is for you to get started with this, because all the technology is there. We've been building to this for decades now, and especially for sales and marketing, right? You can't keep going without having this kind of mindset. And so putting those tools in place, getting them built for your company, and starting to use them from a management point of view, it's no longer optional. If you're not doing this, you're not going to be around in 5 years to complain about the changing tech.
So Sean, we got about 30 seconds left here, so I want to wrap this up, and I'll give you a chance to wrap this up. To me, the idea of internal benchmarking is perhaps one of the single most powerful tools that most businesses aren't using. So the challenge I would leave people with today is to ask themselves, what have they implemented in their internal benchmarking efforts? And if you haven't, why not? What can you do about it? What would be an area that you could start with? What's something you could use and start using instantly today, tomorrow, as soon as possible? What's one simple thing that you could start benchmarking and allowing yourself to improve with? If you have implemented internal benchmarking into your business, share your results with us. Tell us what results you've had, what you've learned, what you haven't learned. That's my challenge for the week. Sean, do you have anything else?
That's a great challenge. I'll just add to it. Noah said, think about what you're going to do. I'm going to say, do it. Right? Think about it and get it done. It's so important, and it's so important to start.
All right, everybody. So listen, internal benchmarking is a topic we will revisit again and again. I know we're trying to keep these nice and tight and concise. Check out the Happy or Not article. We'll definitely post a link to it in the description here. It's a great article. It'll help, again, spur a few more ideas on top of the ones that we've shared here today. But as always, leave a review for the show on iTunes. Send in your comments. We love hearing from them. Send them to your peers. Send them to your colleagues. You can get the podcast now pretty much anywhere, even on Spotify, I believe, iTunes, anywhere else you can get podcasts. So this is all good stuff. The Evergreen Show, Sean, it's growing like a weed. The listener base is growing. Everything's moving up in the world. We've got great stuff here. The key, I think, for me, and the key for most of our listeners is what you said, to do it, to implement, because that's how you'll get the results. Any last words from yourself?
That covers it for me. You did a great summary there, and I look forward to chatting again next week. Thanks, everybody.
See you next week, folks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us each and every week for another great episode of The Evergreen Show with your hosts, Noah Fleming and Sean Veltman. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on The Evergreen Show.